everyone, welcome to the OklaRoots YouTube channel. In today's tutorial, we are partnering up with ByAnnie. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited about this. I have loved ByAnnie patterns forever. I've been wanting to do one of their patterns on my channel since I started the channel. I never had the courage to ask, honestly. But ByAnnie did reach out and they invited me to be a part of their #SoPink blog hop to raise money and awareness for breast cancer in the month of October. And I cannot tell you the happy dance that occurred when I got that email is too embarrassing to share on my channel, but you can imagine how excited I was. So in today's tutorial, we're going to be going over the ByAnnie pattern Project Bags 2.0. Let me just give you a little taste of it. Look at this. It is a gorgeous quilted bag with a clear pocket on the front. So you can see we just open this little zipper up right here, pop our hand in, clear pocket, nice and big. There's actually 4 sizes to this pattern. So this is the medium size. And you can see I had a lot of fun with the fabric on the front. I'm obviously going for a Haunted Mansion vibe here. But then on the back, I used a quilt block. You guys have probably seen this quilt block a lot on my channel. I made a lot of these at one point a few years ago, and I just keep incorporating them into a bunch of patterns. So this is perfect if you have a stray quilt block that you love, but you don't want to like make a whole quilt out of it. You can just put it on this bag. Look how cute. Little handle up top, very simple, very beginner friendly, very exciting. So this is a size medium. This one over here is the size large. So let me just show you the difference. You see, it is a good amount bigger. So the size large is also, they're all quilted. This is using the ByAnnie zipper up top. You can see I kept it very simple. This is more of a Christmas time theme with this beautiful 12 Days of Christmas vinyl on the back. So you can use quilt cotton, you can use anything really. You can use anything, especially for the back. But if you wanted to try this with some vinyl, I do think that's a great option because quilted vinyl is just so yummy. I love that. But then you can see I just kept it very simple on the front with quilt cotton. The third version I made was actually the small version, and it's so cute. Look at this, it's like a little mini purse. Can you imagine this with like a little kid? But this is the medium, and this is the small. So the small is quite a bit smaller than the medium. And for this one, I really wanted to try a lot of vinyl. So we've got obviously this clear vinyl on the front. We've got some vinyl for the top strips, vinyl for the handle, vinyl for the back as well. But I did use quilt weight cotton for the lining of this. So we're going to go through the ins and outs of these. Today, we're going to make the jumbo, which I'm very excited about because I have the small, I have the medium, I have the large, but I feel like the jumbo is going to be the best one. I'm very excited about the jumbo size. So as part of this blog hop, there are a whole bunch of creators sharing all kinds of fun projects the whole month of October. I will have a link down below with the calendar so you can go find everybody on there, see all the fun stuff they're doing. We are also raising money for breast cancer research. All of the ad revenue for this video will be going to the Breast Cancer Research Foundation. The link is down in the description if you'd like to contribute. Please, please make sure you do. The more we learn, the more we do, the safer we're all going to be. If breast cancer has affected you in your life and you'd like to share that story, please make sure you do it down in the comments below. If you just want to share it with me, you're more than welcome to do that as well. You can send me an email. I'm jessica@OklaRoots.com. I would love to hear your story with relation to breast cancer. I have been very, very fortunate in my life. Breast cancer has not affected members of my family. We do have other cancers that have been a big problem, and we'll talk about that more later in the video. As we go through the tutorial, I'll be popping up lots of facts here and there, giving you more information about breast cancer. If you are at an age where you are eligible to have a mammogram, please, please, please make sure you do that. I've had one already, and I know I'm a younger person, but again, we have a certain type of cancer that runs in our family that makes me more prone to it. It's not that bad. Make sure you gotta take care of the girls, right? You gotta take care of the girls. So make sure you get your mammograms. Make sure you stay on top of all of your physicals, all of your checkups and appointments. Stay ahead of this. And that's the best way to fight it, right? It's the best way to fight it is to stay as ahead of it as possible. So if you're new to the OklaRoots YouTube channel, please consider clicking the subscribe button down below. If at any point you like this video, please give it a like. Any questions, comments, stories, shout outs, anything at all you want to say, leave them down in the comment section. I'm so excited about this video. I feel like this is another one of those community engaged videos where we all just kind of come together for one another and we just give virtual hugs like all day long. I'm so excited about that. I'm sending hugs to each and every one of you. No matter what's going on in your life, you have got a hug from me. Also, for more information on this blog hop and this project in particular, make sure you check my blog post. It is linked down below. A little secret between you and I, there's also a giveaway going on the blog, so make sure you go check out the blog, check out the giveaway. We're going to be giving away a kit for this bag. I'm so excited about it. You're going to have everything you need, including the vinyl from everything you need. I'm very excited about it. So make sure you go check out the blog. It is listed down in the description of this video. All right, let's get started on the jumbo size. I think it's gonna be big. Okay, so here's all the material I'll be using for the bag today. Now, the hashtag is #SewPink. So October being Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and pink is really the color of the month. I am incorporating a lot of pink. However, for the back panel, I am going to use this incredibly fun fabric. This fabric is from Backstitch Fabrics. It is very hard to find, but if you do find it, grab it. And it's just a very empowering design that I really, really love and I wanted to use in this bag. So this is going to be for the back panel, and then for the front and the lining and the binding, we will be using different shades of pink over here. For the main fabric, which is going to be pretty much the front and the back, you're going to need at least a fat quarter. For the lining, you'll also need a fat quarter. And then you're going to want some bigger strips for your binding. So you're going to probably want like a ½ yard of fabric for your binding, just so you can get those really nice long, like 42-inch long strips. You know, you don't want to have too many seams in your binding. So find something in your stash that is long enough to make a binding so you don't have a whole bunch of seams. We're going to also be using lots of fun goodies from ByAnnie today. Of course, they're soft and stable. I've been using this since I first started making bags. This is what has been with me from the beginning. I love the soft and stable from ByAnnie. This is a sew-in foam interfacing. It is perfect for every type of bag, especially if you're a little worried about using Decoville Light or even Decoville Heavy. This gives your bag a really firm structure, but it's very easy to sew over. It's domestic machine friendly. You're gonna love it. You're gonna need a nice big piece of this, at least 18 inches by 18 inches. You're gonna also want some fusible interfacing. Now, fusible interfacing is going to be used on any sort of quilt cotton, cotton woven, cotton lycra that's gonna be used on the exterior of the bag. I'm actually not using this. This is Pellon Shapeflex SF101. I'm actually not gonna use this on the lining today because you just don't need to. If you wanna add this to the lining, you're more than welcome to do that, but I have only been using it on any exterior piece of fabric that is quilt cotton, pretty much. From that, you're gonna want at least a ½ yard. And then the most fun part of this, you're gonna want some clear vinyl. Now, this clear vinyl is from ByAnnie. You can see it's really nice. It looks white because it has a white paper backing on the back of it that comes off really easily. And the nice thing about this is you can sew over the paper backing and rip it out of your seams. It's not a problem. But what I do actually is I remove it and I just use this piece underneath the clear vinyl when I'm sewing without getting it in the seams, and it just prevents it from sticking to my machine. But I'm gonna be honest with you guys, this clear vinyl is not a sticky vinyl. I am not using a silicone presser foot. I did not put tape on anything. I've made 3 bags so far. This is a really great vinyl, especially if you're brand new to sewing with clear vinyl. I highly suggest this. So links for all of this will be down in the description of this video. All right, here's all the other stuff. You're gonna need a handbag zipper. Now, I suggest getting some zipper tape. This is all from ByAnnie. This is a nice long white zipper tape. This is actually size 4.5. So a lot of times with zipper tape, we'll use a size 5 or a size 3. So the only thing you wanna remember with that is if you're using a size 4.5 zipper tape, you need to make sure you have a zipper pull that is also made for 4.5. So just think about that. Size 5 and size 4.5 have both worked for this bag. I'm gonna be honest, this is a bag you can make mistakes on and it will still turn out. So we'll talk about that as we go through the bag. Next, I have my bag tag that I always like to add on my bags, and then I have some double-sided tape pretty much just for the bag tag. It's the only place I've been using it. To keep everything together with that foam and the lining and the backing, we're gonna kind of just push it all together and quilt it. I'm using this 505 spray. I love this stuff. You guys see me use it all the time. This is nice because you don't have to worry about sewing over it. It's not gonna gum up your needle, but it's strong enough to hold everything together for as long as you need it to quilt it. My needles, as always, are Schmetz Microtex 8012. My top thread, so the thread going through my needle today, is this Tex 35 weight thread. It's a variegated thread. I love it. In the bobbin, though, I do have my good old Gutermann, just polyester thread down there. A stiletto is going to be incredibly helpful. ByAnnie actually sent me this beautiful wooden stiletto, so I'll have a link for this down below. It is so cute. It is so lightweight, and I like too that it doesn't roll around too much because it does have some flat edges. So like, I don't know if you've seen my other stilettos, sometimes they just kind of start rolling across the screen. This one's not going to do that, which I do appreciate, because if this falls on your foot, it's game over. And then my marking tool today is actually the Soline chalk marker, which I got in a bag kit recently, which I think is super cool. So I'll have a link for all of this stuff down below in the description. Okay, so now let's go over all the biggest pieces of fabric. You're gonna have your body lining. For me, this is quilt cotton, and it does not have any interfacing on it whatsoever. If you wanna add some shape flex to it, go ahead and do that. And then I have my body mane. Now this is the back of the bag. This is like the biggest cut of fabric that's seen on our bag. This is quilt cotton or cotton woven, and it has a woven interfacing on it. So I have shape flex on the back of it. At this same size, you're gonna cut your foam. So all three of these are cut very big. They are bigger than they need to be because after we quilt it, it does shrink a bit, and then we're gonna cut it down to size. So just make sure you pay attention to the measurement that this should be initially, not the measurement we're gonna cut it down to later, because it shrinks when you quilt it. Okay, next up we have a cut of fabric for the handle. This is quilt cotton that does have shape flex on the back of it. And then this little cut here is for the zipper pull. I actually haven't made one of these yet. I probably should have tried this out before the video, but let's just wing it together. This is a piece of quilt cotton with no interfacing, and it's gonna be used for the zipper pull. So let's see how that works out. Next up, we have our zipper strips A and B and our zipper strips A and B lining. So my exterior zipper strips are the same fabric. My lining zipper strips are the same fabric. If you're a little confused here, it is these strips right here, the strip right above the zipper and the strip right below the zipper. So if you want those to be different, think about that now. The exterior zipper strips, these ones here, they are interfaced with my shape flex, and then the lining zipper strips are not interfaced with anything. All right, next up I have my binding. So this is different for every single bag. We're actually gonna bind this just like we bind a quilt. So I know some of you guys are like, nope, I won't do it, I don't bind. Just give it a try. It's very easy. We're not gonna do any hand stitching, don't worry. We're going to bind this using the machine, but it is a rectangle, so it's much easier than binding those curvy edges we did last week. So this is the bottom border piece. You can piece this in a quilted manner. That gives you two options here. I'm gonna keep it simple with just one rectangle of fabric. This is my exterior, so it does have the shape flex on the back. You're gonna need another cut of your lining, and I have no shape flex on that one. And finally, your clear vinyl. This is that big old window on the front of the bag. If you're brand new to sewing with clear vinyl, I do suggest you get the ByAnnie clear vinyl. It is a good weight. It's easier to work with than many others. Once you get comfortable with this, then go find all those fun, super sticky clear vinyls that look amazing and then use those on this bag. This is a great bag if you have a printed clear vinyl, which is so popular right now. Okay, so the first thing we're gonna do is some quilting. Could you skip this step? Yeah, I mean, you could. I wouldn't though. Especially on this size. On the smaller one, you could skip this pretty easily, but on this big of a panel, I wouldn't skip this step. So I have my foam, and I'm going to spray one side of my foam with my 505 spray. Make sure you're not spraying next to like your sewing machine or anything like that. You don't want to get this in all the nooks and crannies, you know? And then I'm gonna take my back piece and I'm just gonna lay it over, line it up, and press it down. There we go. And it shouldn't give you too much of a fight, because if you have that interfacing on here, it's not gonna wrinkle up on you too much. All right, just make sure it covers as much of it as you can get it. Oh, look how cute that is. That's so fun. Now I'm gonna flip this over, and I'm gonna spray the back side and do the same thing with the lining. And I'll tell you, I've been using this 505 spray on quilts since the beginning. I've sprayed it everywhere. I've sprayed it on carpets, I've sprayed it on tile floors, wood floors, cement. I've sprayed it everywhere, and it's never been a problem. It wipes off easily, it'll vacuum out, it stops being sticky after a while, it doesn't stay sticky forever. So if you get it on a rug, you don't have to worry that you're gonna have a sticky spot that needs to be shampooed. It will dissolve on its own over time. All right, so now we have everything like we want it. You know what? Does this have a print? Does this have a direction on it? You guys? All right, it kind of looks like my lining has a direction, doesn't it? So I'm going to remove it, spray it a little bit more. I'll tell you, that lining fabric does not stick to this at all. So I'm gonna give it a generous spray. I'm gonna rotate this this way. Yeah, that's the way I want it. Make sure you've also ironed your lining and your exterior before you do this so that you don't have a bunch of wrinkles. You can see putting down the lining side is a little bit more wrinkly because it doesn't have that shape flex on the back. That's okay. Okay, so now for quilting this, I'm gonna quilt this with the exterior right side up. So my variegated thread will show on this side. So with quilting, I don't wanna take away from the print too much. So I think I'm actually gonna do some diagonal lines, and I'm just gonna eyeball the distance. You can definitely get a ruler out here and a marking tool and mark your quilt lines and follow those. I say just have fun with it. Don't worry too much about everything being perfectly straight. You know how I am. I'm not a big fan of perfection. But yeah, I think I'm just gonna do some thicker diagonal lines. We don't have to have quilt lines that are really close together. They don't need to be a 1/2 inch apart. You can have them be 2 inches apart and be fine here. So I'm gonna take this to the machine and do that. I like to quilt at about a top stitching length, so 3.5 millimeters. So I had to stop after a little bit because this is putting up a fight. This size and also this lining is making this a little difficult. So the lining does not want to stick at all to the back of my foam. So we are going to have to use some pins to hold this in place, or we can use clips. I think I'm gonna use some pins actually. So I have it nice and flat. Got a pin dish here. I'm gonna grab some pins and I'm pinning through the exterior and the lining. Now, if you're using vinyl here, you're gonna wanna grab some clips and just clip all the material along the edges. And then, I mean, it's mostly my fault too. Quilting 101, always start your quilting from the middle and then work your way out to the edges. You don't start on the corner because then this is what happens. All right, so I've got pins sporadically spread out on here to hold everything together. Let's do this top corner as well because this lining does not want to stick. My goodness. I don't know what it is about this fabric, but it does not want to stick there. All right, so now I'm gonna go back to the machine and I'm actually gonna start from the very beginning this time. I'm gonna just quilt a diagonal line straight down the middle and then I'll work towards where I was over here. Hopefully that won't be a problem. And then I'll work towards the other corner as well. Alrighty, so let's take a look. So you might have noticed my lines are all over the place. I completely eyeball it. Some of them are really thick, some of them are pretty thin. I'm okay with that. I think that that looks cool. So here's the lining side. We had a little bit of trouble with it, but it's fine. I did not trim any of the threads. I do not backstitch because we're gonna cut all this down anyways. I'm okay with it, but you can really see the difference in those quilting lines. Now, I like this because I think it gives it an organic feel, right? It kind of reminds me of like the striations on a tree. So I think that looks cool. But again, if you want it to be more perfect, then just use a ruler and some sort of like a marking tool, like a Hera marker or even a chalk pencil, and lay it all out and just follow those lines, and then you'll have perfect straight lines. Okay, once you have it all quilted out, now you're gonna remeasure and you're going to trim this down to the size indicated for the size you're making. So every step of this pattern has 4 sizes for everything, so that way each each size you're making is using the same step, just make sure you figure out which one is yours and cut this down to that size. So since this is the jumbo one, it's gonna be the biggest one. So I'm just gonna quickly trim this down. All right, so here we go. It's all trimmed down, ready to go. So cute. What we want to do before we're done with this is we want to go around all 4 edges at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. You can do it at a 4 millimeter at a basting length if you want. We just want to make sure all of these corners are basted together, so it's going to be really easy to attach everything to it later. So we're just going to do that real quick at the machine. All right, so once you have it all basted together, this is good to go. I love the way this looks. We can put this to the side. So now you can grab your zipper tape and just trim it down to the size indicated for the bag you're making. I have my zipper pull and I'm just gonna attach this on. There are a lot of little devices out there that can help you put your zipper pulls on your zipper tape. I just do it by hand, by just kind of like putting one side in first and the other side and looking from the top and making sure the coils are lined up, and then pulling it down. The nice thing is that our zipper tape is cut oversized, so this will be trimmed down later. So don't worry if it's like a little wonky, because you will be able to trim this down and clean it up later. You can go ahead and put your zipper to the side. Okay, next up in the pattern is just preparing your interfaced pieces. This is going to be your border on the bottom. If you're gonna piece this together using quilt blocks or rectangles like one of the options has in the pattern, you're not gonna apply your Shape Flex to this yet. However, if you are just keeping this as a rectangle, go ahead and apply your Shape Flex to this piece, which is the bottom border. Apply the SF101 to the handle, as well as the 2 exterior zipper strips. So these are the 2 pieces of rectangles that are gonna go right on the outside of the zipper tape. All right, so the first piece we're gonna work on is the handle. Let's just get that prepped. So take your handle piece. Now this is the same size for all 4 bags. So make sure you got the right piece. It can be easy, depending on the bag you're making, it can be easy to think this is your bottom border. Make sure you remeasure it or label it. We're gonna flip it right side down, wrong side up, and we're gonna fold the long edges, wrong sides together, lining it up like a hot dog bun, and just press right along that crease. There we go. This is pretty much just marking the midpoint. If you're using vinyl for this, which I actually don't suggest vinyl for the handle because it is a little stiff, but if you were using vinyl, you could use a marker here instead of the iron. And now we're going to fold these long edges, wrong sides together, to meet that midpoint mark that was created by pressing on our last one. There we go. Now we're going to do the same thing with the other side, pulling that long edge in, wrong sides together to meet the middle. There you go. So they should both be meeting in the middle. And now just refold the whole thing so those long raw edges are tucked in, and give it one final press. It gets hot, so keep your fingers away from it. You don't want to get burned. I forgot to share this in the beginning. I always have my clips. I will be using clips today as well. So now if you'd like, you can add some clips along the double folded edge just to hold it in place. And this is our handle. I do suggest quilt cotton for the handle because you do want this to be a little bit looser. The way that we're sewing the binding on and everything, it makes it kind of stiff. Let me show you. So you can see in this version here, I have a vinyl handle, and when I kind of hold it, it doesn't really want to come up all the way. It kind of like, you see, it doesn't nicely just drape up. It's a little too stiff, so I do suggest quilt cotton for the handle. So now we're going to take this to the sewing machine and we're going to top stitch on all 4 edges at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, once you have your handle all top stitched, you can put this to the side. We'll attach this later in the bag. Okay, so if you are piecing your bottom border, only if you're using a bottom border, so let me make that clear first. If you're making the small pouch, it does not have a bottom border. If you're making the medium, large, or jumbo, it does have a bottom border. So if you're piecing it, make sure you go ahead and piece your bottom border and then cut it out so that it is the size the pattern indicates, and then fuse your Shape Flex onto the back, okay? Piece it first and then do the Shape Flex. If you're not piecing it like I'm not piecing it, we're just gonna grab that bottom border and we're gonna grab our clear vinyl. And now what we wanna do is we wanna attach the bottom border onto the bottom of the clear vinyl. So just line it up like you're gonna have it in the end. If you do have a print on your clear vinyl, make sure the top is up here, the bottom is down here. Same thing with the bottom fabric. If it's a directional print, top, bottom. And then we're just gonna flip them right sides together on the bottom edge of the vinyl. And then clip them together. Okay, now we're gonna sew these two pieces together at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, and you can see I did sew through that backing paper. So see this here, this is the backing paper for my clear vinyl. I did sew through it. This little strip up here is actually gonna stay in the bag. I'm okay with that. If you're not, make sure you rip this all out right now, and then just keep your piece of paper so that you can kind of position it underneath your clear vinyl, but just away from the needle as we go. I will do that soon, but not yet. So once we have these right sides together, sewn together, grab your lining bottom border, and let's take our clear vinyl and lay it so that we're looking at the wrong side of the clear vinyl. So for me, that would just be like the paper side, and then the outer piece is below it. So I'm gonna take my lining cut now, and I'm gonna lay that right side down on the back of the clear vinyl on the same edge that I've already sewn. Remember, this right here is gonna flip like that and end up on the bottom of the bag. So if you have a directional print, think about it. And I'm just gonna line it up on that edge and clip it in place. So now I have my clear vinyl sandwiched in between the exterior and the lining pieces. If you did not interface your quilt cotton, be a little careful here because it can get stretchy. So just be gentle with it. Don't tug too hard on anything. I also like to clip the edges just to kind of hold it all in place so that it doesn't start twisting at the machine. All right, and now we're gonna sew at a 1/2 of an inch seam allowance along this clipped edge. If you're a little worried about pulling this paper out of the seams, you can decrease your stitch length to a 2mm stitch length, and that will help this perforate really easily. I keep it at a 2.5mm stitch length, and I will show you, I just rip the paper right out of the seam. So if you're worried, you can make your stitch length just a little bit shorter. All right, it's all sewn together. I'm just gonna kind of pull back my fabric, and now I'm just gonna grab my paper, and I can just ever so gently just pull right at that seam. And you see it just comes right out. That's what's nice about this paper versus like a tissue paper. Tissue paper is gonna leave a lot of little bits in here, and you're gonna have to get tweezers out and kind of take them out one by one. But this just comes right out. No problem, there we go. And I do still have the paper right here in this seam. I could get some tweezers and remove it, but it's fine, honestly, it's fine. So now to do the top stitching, and this is really cool. I like this in the pattern, it makes it a little bit easier. We're just gonna work on one side at a time. So take your lining side, and we're looking at the back of it, and we're gonna flip it right side up, just like that. Now you can definitely grab an iron here. Just make sure you're covering your clear vinyl so that the iron doesn't actually touch this. I'm not going to, I'm just going to finger press this so that it's nice and straight right here on the seam. And what we're gonna do is we're going to stitch only over the lining at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. The exterior is still right sides together with the vinyl. It's not up yet. We're just doing the lining. So we're just gonna go right along this edge at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance on the lining side to hold the lining in place, which makes the other side a lot more easy to stitch down. It's just a much easier way to do this. All right, so once you have the lining top stitch down, take your exterior and finger press that up so that it's wrong sides together with the lining. So now you have an idea of what it looks like, but this is actually upside down. This is how it's gonna look in the end. Remember, this is the bottom border strip. So I like to finger press it, but then what I like to do is line up these bottom raw edges as best as I can and clip those together, and that kind of helps pull that border down. Now, if they don't match up perfectly, that is fine, okay? I want you to remember that. There's no room for perfection in bag making. So if they're a little off, if you can see a little bit of the back side of the lining, that is perfectly fine. We can clean it up at a later step. All right, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna top stitch along this edge right here on the exterior. You can top stitch at a 1/4 inch seam allowance, or you can top stitch at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. One thing you're gonna run into is this clear vinyl is probably gonna start sticking to the bed of your machine, which is expected. So what I do is I take that piece of paper that we pulled off, and I take it so that the kind of sticky, shiny side is the side that's gonna touch the vinyl. And I just lay it right underneath it like that. So it's not gonna be in the stitches. See, I'm keeping it away from where I'm stitching, but now I can move it around and I don't have to worry about it sticking to anything. So keep this paper nearby, If you don't have a piece of paper like this, grab some tissue paper. I've honestly used tissues before. I used to grab anything to put underneath here that can just prevent it from sticking. All right, before we move on, I'm gonna attach my bag tag to the middle of this bottom panel. So grab a ruler, find yourself a midpoint mark. Remember, we will be binding the edge here, so don't have it down here unless that's where you want it, then do what you want. But I'm gonna have it closer to the bottom of the vinyl. And this is where I use that double-sided tape. I just stick it onto the back of this and then top stitch. It's easiest that way. So I just marked myself a little dot that is about 1.5 inches down from the top edge. That measurement changes depending on the size of the border. And I'm just gonna add some of this double-sided tape to the back of my bag tag. I will have a link for where I get these made. Highly, highly recommend them. You can get them in cork, leather, vinyl, whatever is easiest for you to work with. And then I'm just gonna stick it here, try to make sure it's straight. It looks straight. I can always grab a ruler and confirm that, but it looks good to me. And now I'm just gonna top stitch along all 4 edges of my bag tag, but only through the exterior. So remember, I have these pinned. I need to unpin them, so don't forget this. I'm gonna take that lining on the back, I'm just gonna flip that up so it's behind the vinyl. There we go. So I'm only stitching through the exterior and my bag tag. I'm just gonna go around at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. And if you've been watching some of my other bag making videos, you know what I've been doing lately with my bag tags is I keep the tails, so the top tails and the bobbin tails, I keep them really long and I don't backstitch. So then I flip this over and I pull on those bobbin tails until I can see the top thread. And I just pull the top thread to the back and do this for both of them. So now I have 4 tails back here, 2 bobbin, 2 top, and I just split them up 2 and 2 and give them a knot. I knot them about 2 or 3 times. And that just gives a really clean look to the top stitching on the front. You can't really see where I started or stopped, but it's also nice and secure with some knots back here. And then I can just trim those down. There we go. All right, so now flip your lining and your exterior so they are wrong sides together. And then just clip them together, making sure you're matching up all the edges as best as possible. If one is a little bit longer than the other, over here like on the bottom, that is fine. I mean, I have a little bit of the back of the lining peeking through over here on the edge, that's also fine. And now we're gonna go back to the machine and we're gonna baste along the bottom and the edges at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance just to hold the lining and the exterior together. All right, so now we're gonna attach the top zipper strip onto the top of this. This is so cute, this is gonna be big, isn't it? So grab your exterior zipper strip so that has the interfacing on it, and we're going to lay it right sides together with the top edge of our clear vinyl. Just matching up that edge. I know it's a little tricky to see. And then just add some clips here to hold it together perfectly. All right, so now we're gonna sew along this top edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, there we go. We've got the top edge sewn on. Now grab a lining for the zipper strip. And we're going to take the lining piece and we're going to lay it right side down on the other side of the vinyl. So if it's clear, you should be seeing that exterior piece. And we're going to just line it up right along that same edge. You might notice with these kind of long, skinny strips that don't have any interfacing on them, they want to stretch. And we don't want them to stretch. Okay, so now we're going to sew along this clipped edge at 1/4 inch seam allowance. All right, once you have that sewn together, now we're going to, just like we did on the bottom, we're gonna push up that lining. So finger press this. I don't suggest using an iron because it does get very tricky trying to make sure you don't melt your vinyl, and you're getting to a point now where you've done enough work. It would be sad if you melted your vinyl. So just give it a good finger press. You know, it's not a firm piece of material here. So now let's top stitch right along the edge on the lining at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Remember, our exterior is still facing down, so you can still see it through the clear vinyl. So once you have the lining top stitched up, let's go ahead and flip this over, and you're gonna finger press the exterior to go up as well. Now, the pattern does not have you top stitch this bottom fold of the exterior. If you're using vinyl for this strip up here, I do suggest you go ahead and top stitch that. I have personally made a couple without top stitching here, and I've made one with top stitching. So I'm gonna go ahead and top stitch right along this edge just because I feel like it's a little bit easier to keep everything in place. But just so you know, you don't have to. If you don't wanna top stitch here, you don't have to. But I'm just gonna pull my exterior up, wrong sides together with the lining, and clip along this top edge. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to top stitch right along the exterior bottom edge here at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. And then I'm also going to base stitch along this top clipped edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So I'm top stitching the fold and I am stitching together the lining and the exterior along this raw edge to hold it in place. All right, look how cute this is looking. So now we're going to work on the zipper. So set this to the side for just a moment. So you can grab your zipper and your zipper strip A and zipper strip A lining. So first thing we're going to do actually is take our lining and our exterior for our zipper strips and lay them wrong sides together, lining up all 4 edges. They should be the exact same size. And we're clipping along the bottom edge here. So if you have a directional print, this is going to be the bottom edge. I know it's flipped upside down because it's easier for me to clip that way. But this right here is the bottom edge that we're worried about at the moment. And now we're going to stitch along that bottom edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, and we're just holding the lining and the exterior together, wrong sides together. All right, so now let's grab your zipper tape and lay your zipper so that it is right side up, and the zipper pull as it's closed is going towards the left. So as it's closing, it goes towards the left. Now grab that strip that you just sewed, and we're going to take that bottom edge right here of that strip that has the stitches, and we're going to line that up right side down on the top edge of our zipper. So it should look just like this. Now, the pattern suggests instead of lining it up raw edge right against the edge of the zipper tape, you're going to have it go down just a scotch. So anywhere between 1/8 and 1/16 inch seam allowance. Don't worry about measuring it. You just have it go down a bit. So you might be able to see this a little bit better when I'm at the sewing machine because my colors are very light here. And also I have the lining right side up, so the exterior is right side down against the right side of the zipper tape. It's just touching those teeth. And as I'm clipping this in place, I just make sure I see just a little skinny bit of the top of that zipper tape. All right, so now we're going to stitch down this strip to the zipper at 1/4 inch seam allowance. Make sure if you have to move your zipper, you move it out of the way. Don't try to like bubble around it and you're gonna have a wonky seam. We don't want wonky seams. So I'm going to move it more towards the middle. You can see when I move it to the right, it opens. And then as I get to it, I will lift up my presser foot and move my zipper out of the way to keep a nice straight line here. And I'm just going to be making sure that, again, I see a little bit of the zipper tape outside of my fabric. So when I flip this up later, I'll have the right side of my exterior on the same side as the right side as my zipper tape. You guys understand this. Okay, let's go sew this. All right, so when I sew this, I sew it 1/4 of an inch from the edge of the zipper tape, just in case you were wondering. And remember, the zipper tape is quite a bit longer than this zipper strip. We want it to be that way so that we have a little bit on the ends and we can trim that down later. So now we're going to flip our strips right side up. And when you do this, you might notice that the lining extends farther than the exterior. So what you could do if you want to prevent that is you can go ahead and just base stitch along this edge now. I honestly don't think it's that big of a deal. We can trim it down later if we need to. So we're going to press this up, and you can grab an iron here to help you with this. What I'm going to do is actually clip along this raw edge, holding the lining and the exterior wrong sides together at the same spot. And then once you have that pressed down, we're going to top stitch along this bottom folded edge right by the zipper teeth on the exterior fabric at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, once you have that top stitch, go ahead and grab your front panel that has everything attached to that clear vinyl, and we're going to attach this zipper to the top edge of this panel. So all you have to do is line it up so that the bottom raw edge of the zipper tape is right against the top raw edge of our clear panel unit and lay it right sides down. I find this is easiest to line up the edges if we flip this over so we can see this part coming through the clear vinyl. So what you want to do is a little bit more work because you got to think of a few things here. You want to make sure the edge of the other panel is at the same place as the edge of this top panel here. So that's good. But then you also want to make sure you have your zipper tape extending again about, just a scotch, 1/8 to 1/16 of an inch past the fabric, just like we did before. Once you get one corner lined up, the rest of it's easy. So I'm just going to clip this in place. And once again, I'm just clipping my zipper strip with the exterior right sides together with the exterior of my zipper tape. And I'm doing this just making sure I have a little bit of the zipper tape peeking through on the top and go all the way down. Make sure you don't lose your zipper pull at any point. That's easy to do. So now we're gonna go to the machine and stitch along this top edge over here at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. All right, once you have these sewn together, what we wanna do is we wanna press the zipper tape so that it goes behind this bottom panel over here. So just get it set up and then give it a finger press. You could grab an iron here and press it with an iron if that's easier. Just as always, make sure you don't touch the iron to the clear plastic down here. And we want that seam with the zipper tape to go behind the fabric on the bottom. We don't want the seam to go behind the zipper. All right, once you have that flat and straight, we're gonna take this back to the machine and we're gonna top stitch right along this fold next to the zipper at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Alrighty, there we go. Most of the construction is done. Now we just kind of have to put it all together. So let's grab your back panel. Remember, this is gonna be on the back. Oh, I love this so much, but we're gonna flip it over like this. This is the lining side. So lay your back panel so that the lining side is facing up. Take your clear panel so that the exterior is facing up, and we're just gonna line it up right on top of our panel. It should be the same size. If it's not, that's okay. We can trim things down. So let's just make sure. If you have this, if the top or the bottom is a little bit longer, line up the top first, okay? Because we can always trim down the bottom, that's fine, but we don't have as much real estate here at the top. So we wanna make sure the top is lined up. So I'm gonna line up the top with the top corner of my backing just like that. And I'm just gonna clip along this top edge first. All right, so once I have that clipped, now I'm going to clip along the sides. And again, don't worry if anything is a little bit bigger. So I have a side over here where the vinyl goes a little bit farther than I want it to. I can trim that down. That's not a big deal. Remember that. You have a lot of correction here you can do. So if anything's a little too big, a little too wonky, we can trim this down after we sew it together and get it just the right size. It might not be exact size that the pattern has, but it will still be a very good size. All right, so once you have everything clipped in place to the best of your ability, we are going to take this to the sewing machine and we are going to baste along all 4 edges at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Take that zipper and put it in the middle, okay? Don't have that over here on the edge and then you just sew it off and then you cut it off. And then what are you gonna do? I mean, you can fix it, but still. We're gonna have this all pinned together, zipper in the middle, 1/8 of an inch seam allowance around all 4 edges. Look how cute this is looking. Okay, so now we want to trim up all of the edges. So if you have any like vinyl overhang, anything that's overhanging on the sides, like these zippers, let's trim those down. Double check, make sure your zipper pull is here, not here, before you trim that down. There we go. And I like to kind of take a look from all the sides. So I have a little bit of clear vinyl I can trim up. So I'm gonna look from the back here as well. And I can see I can trim up this little edge right here. All right, this is all looking good. How fun is that back, right? Look at that. Oh, I love it. This would be fun too if you had one of the quilt blocks or anything for So Pink. That would be cool if you could do a little mini, you know, breast cancer awareness quilt block down here. I would love that. Okay, so before we address the binding, we got to put our handle on. The handle goes on the top, so let's flip this over so we're looking at the back side. So the pattern is going to tell you exactly how far in the straps need to go depending on the size that you're building. So I went ahead and measured from the edge all the way in so that I could find where the outer edge of my strap is going to be placed. I made a mark using my chalk pen, and I'm just going to line up my strap so that one of the raw edges is right along the raw edge on the top of my bag, and then the outer edge is going right against that mark. So they do give you the marks for the inner and outer edges. I only mark the outer edge and just make sure I remember that's where the outer edge goes. So once I have that in place, I'm going to grab some clips to hold that together. And now we're going to swing the other side up, but we want to make sure to stay straight, so don't like flip it around like this. And I mean, unless that's the type of handle you want, then go for it. But what we want to do is we want to just pull this up like that, see? And then I have a mark again for my other outer edge. I'm going to line that up and add a couple clips to hold it in place. There we go. So if I were to kind of flatten out my handle, this is what it looks like. It goes straight down and then it kind of folds like that. See? It's nice and straight. If you were to loop it, it's nice and straight. So now I'm just going to sew along both of these edges at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance just to hold it in place. All right, friends, the bag building is done. Now we just have to finish it off with some binding. So So if you're looking to take a break, not yet. Let's build the binding first. And after you've built the binding, then you have permission to take a break. You can take a break whenever you want. I'm just joking. Okay, let's put this to the side and let's get that binding. So here are my 2 strips of binding. If you're building the small size, you only have 1 strip of binding. If you're building any other size, you'll have 2. I'm gonna go ahead and just cut off the selvage here. I'm using a lawn material, so I usually use quilt cotton, but this had a nice tiny print. When I pick my binding material, I like fabric that has a really small print on it. So polka dots, lines, anything that has a really tiny print, because binding is small, and so it gives nice texture. You don't really see the exact design so much, or the exact character or object on the binding, but you see the texture of it, which is really nice. Solid is also a solid choice. Ba-bum-bum. That was a funny one. Solids are also a great choice here. Okay, so take your 2 strips of binding, and we're gonna lay them right sides together on one corner, but perpendicular. So not like this, we're gonna lay them like this, perpendicular to one another. And now grab your marking tool, and on the top piece of binding here, I want to mark where that bottom corner on the underneath piece is. So I'm just gonna go like that so I know where that corner is. Make sure it's all squared up. I'm gonna grab my ruler, and I'm gonna go from the top corner of my top piece of binding down to that mark. So I have a nice diagonal here, and I'm just gonna mark that diagonal line. And I'll grab a couple pins to hold this together. Binding is very loosey-goosey material. This is even more lightweight because it is a lawn material and not a quilt cotton. So I need to be gentle with it. So now I'm just gonna stitch right along that marked line. So once they're stitched together, I'm just gonna trim down this little hanging corner here so that I have a 1/4 inch seam allowance. There we go. So just leave it like that. Now grab your iron, get it nice and hot. And what we want to do is we want to lay this right side down so we're looking at the wrong side where that seam is, and we want to press that seam allowance open. Getting this open is going to make it a lot easier to sew it all in place and keeps everything nice and flat. So just press that open. Once you've done that, go to the end of your binding and lay your binding right side down. And we're going to fold our binding wrong sides together, long sides together, just like this. There we go. And just fold along the entire length of your binding. So once you have your binding pressed in half, if you need a break, now's a good time to take it, because binding is not that challenging, but again, I've done it a lot. But if you need a moment, take your moment. Okay, so now let's attach our binding. So take your unit and lay it so that the front is down and you're looking at the back panel here. And I always like to attach my binding starting at the bottom, because I feel like whenever we're connecting them in the end, if it's a little sloppy, it's less noticeable on the bottom. Totally your preference though. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna measure in 2 inches from each edge and then make a mark. So you can use your chalk pencil, you can use a pen, just something to mark 2 inches in from each end. We wanna have a nice opening here because that's gonna make it a lot easier to combine the ends of this when we're done. All right, so I'm rotating this. My 2 inch mark is right here. Now I'm going to take my binding and I'm going to line it up so the raw open edges of my binding are along the raw edge right here. This is the bottom edge of my unit, and I'm going to let the end go further than the middle, so almost to that other 2 inch mark up here. And I'm just going to line it up along that whole edge. And I'm going to grab a clip and I'm going to clip it at my 2 inch mark down here all the way to the bottom corner. So now I'm going to go to the sewing machine, and I'm going to start at that 2 inch mark, and I'm going to back stitch well, and I'm going to stitch all the way along this edge until I'm 1/4 inch away from this bottom edge here, and I'm going to back stitch there. Okay, so you can see I just have a little bit stitched here, but that's all I need for now. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my binding and I am going to fold it up. So I have this nice little diagonal right here. My binding is folded straight up just like that. And then I'm going to put my finger right on that diagonal and I'm going to pull my binding straight down, making sure as I do that I'm folding it, and that fold is right along that edge I just sewed. See, this is how we get that nice 90-degree angle. And then I'm just going to grab a clip to hold that in place. So now I'm going to start from the very top edge here where the fold is and just sew along this whole edge at 1/4 inch seam allowance until I get 1/4 inch away from this bottom raw edge, where I will again backstitch and stop. There we go, it's sewn all the way. So now I'm gonna rotate this unit so that I can work on it on the top right again. And I'm gonna take my strip and I'm just gonna fold it up so that I have that nice 45-degree angle. And the raw edges of my binding are right along the raw edge over here on the right. So everything is just a nice straight line with this 45-degree angle. And then I'm gonna fold it down so that that fold lines up with the top edge I've already sewn. So now my binding goes at a nice 90-degree angle, nice and clean. I'm gonna add a clip here to hold that in place. And then once again, I'm gonna sew along this top edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. As I go over the straps, I'm going to kind of straighten them out. You see how they kind of wanna V down like that? I'm just gonna straighten them out as I go over it, but I am going over the straps laying down like that. Once again, I'll stop a 1/4 inch away from the bottom edge here, making sure I backstitch. Once again, let's rotate this. And just like we did on the other 2 corners, we're gonna flip the binding up so that it's nice and lined up with that edge that we have to work on. And we have a 45-degree angle over here. And then fold it down so the fold is against the top raw edge. And then just grab a clip to hold it in place so you don't have to redo this at the machine. And then once again, we're gonna go all the way down this edge, stopping a 1/4 inch before I reach the end. Last corner. So we're going to do this the same way, but we're just not going to sew all the way down. So once again, just fold this. There we go. And then grab a clip to hold it. But this time we're going to start at the top, backstitch, and we're going to go to our 2-inch mark. So make sure you find your 2-inch mark. And we're going to stop at that 2-inch mark and backstitch well. So that way we have these nice long tails and a big opening here to work with to close it all up. Okay, the hardest part of binding is closing up these raw edges so that it's nice and seamless and looks clean. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna find a middle mark. It doesn't have to be the exact midpoint, just someplace in the middle here. And I'm going to grab a pin and just pin right in the middle, just like that. So there's my midpoint mark. Now our binding is 2 1/4 inches wide. So what we're gonna do is we're going to take our strip and line it up perfectly along this bottom edge so that it extends past that pin. I'm gonna grab a ruler and I'm going to measure half of the width of my binding. So remember, my binding is 2 1/4 inches wide. So I'm gonna measure 1 1/8 inch to the right of this pin. So this side over here is gonna extend past the pin 1 1/8 inch. For this, I'm gonna grab a marker that's a little bit easier to see, and I'm just gonna mark a line just like that, see? There we go. And now on that marked line, I'm going to cut my binding. There we go. So you see my binding coming from the left, it extends over the pin to the right by 1 1/8 inch. I'm gonna move that out of the way. I'm gonna do the same thing on the other side, except we're going the other direction. So this time the binding coming from the right is gonna go past the pin, and I'm gonna measure 1 1/8 inch past that pin to the left this time. And I'm gonna mark a line. And now I'm just gonna cut right on that marked line. There we go. So now my binding should overlap each other just like that. Okay, so remove your pin. So now the hard part. We're gonna take our bindings, make sure they're straight, don't have them twisted, make sure they're straight. And we're gonna fold them right sides together. So just open them up and you're gonna fold them right sides together, except we're not gonna sew them at a straight stitch length. We're going to rotate them. So just like when we started and we connected these long strips together, they are rotated at a 90-degree angle. So I'm gonna do that again. Here are my strips. They are flat and they are straight. And I'm going to bring them right sides together, just like that. And then I'm just gonna rotate them 90 degrees. I know this is a little wacky. It takes practice. But what I wanna do is I want to clip them as best I can right sides together. Now this is gonna fight you right here. This is impossible to get this exactly the way you want it by keeping this flat. So what you gotta do is you gotta fold your unit up, okay? Smush it up, because we don't care about all this right now. Right now all we're focused on is connecting these 2 ends of our binding. And so if we have to mush up our bag to do that, that's fine. So I'm just doing all of the corners, all 4 corners, just trying to get it nice and flat, nice and straight. The hardest part is always down here. And remember, if this isn't perfect, that's okay. Doesn't have to be. There we go. And now what we want to do is we want to sew from one corner to the other, just like we did when we first connected these. Don't sew from this bottom corner here across. That's not going to help you. We're going to go from this top corner right here all the way to the other one. If you want, you can grab a ruler. So what I like to do is I like to mark on my top piece of binding where that bottom corner is for the binding underneath. There we go. And then I can grab a ruler and go from that top corner all the way to my mark. So I have a nice straight line. There we go. It's a little hard to do holding it, but it gives me an idea of where I'm sewing. So now with these ends right sides together and perpendicular to one another, let's go to the sewing machine and just sew right along that diagonal mark to connect them. All right, in my opinion, that is the hardest part, honestly, because you got this just fighting you and you're trying to keep it together. To me, that's the hardest part. So once you have it sewn together, congratulations. Let's trim down the seam. I even have a little bit of a pinch and a pleat because it bunched up while I was sewing it, and that's okay. So now we're just gonna trim down that corner. Make sure you don't accidentally trim any of your binding. That would be so sad. We're just gonna gently trim down that corner to about a 1/4 inch seam allowance. There you go. So now you see when I let it go and I just kind of fold it and pull on this, it's pretty much the right size. Mine's always just a tidbit too big, and I think that's because of the stretch of the material, but I'm okay with it. If you want, you can grab an iron and press this seam open. I just finger press it open and then fold it back, hot dog style, and then line up the raw edges with the raw edge of your bag. And just try to get it nice and clean. If it's a little loose, I think it's okay. Mine's always a little loose and it still turns out looking pretty great. All right, so now on this opening here where we stopped the stitching before, we're gonna continue stitching at a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way to where we started stitching. Just make sure you back stitch at the beginning and the end. We're just closing up that bottom hole. All right, there we go. That is the last of it. So now we just have to wrap it around. And this to me is more of the fun part. So you just wrap that binding around so it goes to the front. And this is when it starts coming together and looking really cool. So I just grab clips and I will clip this whole thing before I take it to the sewing machine. So it's pretty easy on the straight edges, but once you get to the corners here, I have this top edge wrapped and I have a nice little 45-degree angle here. And then the side edge over here is still sticking out. So I'm just gonna fold that in so that this top edge and these side folds, they kind of meet up at the one spot here. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you get it angled the way you like it and then put a clip on it. And just go around your whole bag, wrapping around the binding. It should completely cover the stitching on the front, so you shouldn't see any of the stitching on the front over here. All right, once you have it all wrapped around and clipped in place, now all we have to do is go around all the edges and stitch it down about 1/8 of an inch, maybe just less than 1/8 of an inch. Try to get as close to the folded edge as you can, but not so close that you don't catch it, you know, so more of 1/8 of an inch. But we're gonna go around all the 4 edges. Once you get to these corners, just make sure your needle is in both edges. So your needle is going through the side and the bottom edge on that corner before you pivot. So I raise my presser foot and then I'll pivot and then go along the other edge. But if your needle's only in one of the fabrics, then this corner might come undone and it's a mess. So just try to make sure your needle's through all of it before you raise the presser foot and pivot. And just go around all 4 edges, stitching it in place. There we go. Your bag is done. The binding is fully attached. You can see on the back that row stitching we just did, it does show, but since we quilted this already, it's really not that noticeable. And I just realized I forgot to do the zipper pull. All right, let's go ahead and give that a try. Okay, so here is the strip for the zipper pull. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna double fold this like we've done before. So we're gonna fold the whole thing in half, wrong sides together, long sides together. This is gonna get tiny, just like that. And then we're gonna fold in the long raw edges again to meet that middle mark. And then do the same thing with the other side, folding the long raw edge up to meet that middle. Holy guacamole, this is tiny. All right, and then fold the whole thing in half again so that your zipper pull strip is just 1/4 inch wide. That's so skinny. Make sure you don't have any interfacing on this piece of fabric. The lighter the fabric, the better. All right, I am gonna add some clips to this to just hold it together because this will not want to stay together at my sewing machine. Okay, so now we're gonna go to the sewing machine and we're just gonna stitch right down the center of this strip. We're just going right down the middle of the strip. I'm gonna start and stop about 1/4 inch from each raw edge, and I'm gonna back stitch at the beginning and the end as well. Okay, so now after you have it stitched, it says to trim the edges at like a 45-degree angle. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. That's why I didn't stitch all the way to the end, because I didn't want to accidentally trim over the end of my stitching. And then it says to bring the short edges together and loop those through the zipper pull like that, and then loop it through the loop. Oh yeah, that's cute. All right, that was easy enough. That wasn't so bad. So that's a great little addition. This is fun, I like that. So here is the bag all done. Very cute, nice and big. Let's see how it compares to the other ones. All right, are you guys ready to see how cute this is? Oh my gosh. Oh, I love this. I love this like really vibrant kind of darker pink print with this really light colored print in the background. And I actually love this zipper pull. I've never made one of those. I always am like, it's fine, I don't need it, but this is very handy. I love that. I love how big it is. And then let's just look at the back. Oh, the back, it's so empowering. I love it. I love all these women on here. Wow, okay, so let's look at this. This is the jumbo. Let me get the large. So this is the large compared to the jumbo. Look at that. It is actually quite a bit bigger. So I like that. A lot of times when we have multiple sizes in a pattern, they're different obviously, but they're not like really different. They're just like a little bit different. So I like that all of these sizes are a good amount different because that means they can be used for very specific things. One of the best things to use these project pouches with are quilt blocks. If you're working on a quilt right now and you have really big quilt blocks, you can use this one. If you have smaller quilt blocks, you can use the smaller ones. So let's see, that's the large and the jumbo, and then here's the medium. Let's just stack them all up. Yes, that's awesome. And then here's the small. So what's cool about this, like let's say you're going on a retreat. You can put all your notions and your needles and all things like that, and here your threads. And then here you can put a lot of your like rotary cutter and some rulers and tools like that. And then in the bigger ones, you put your fabric, your quilt blocks. What a nice way to stay organized. I love this. And I love that they all have a strap because in my house, what that means is I can like hang these on the corner of a chair. I can hang these on a doorknob. I can kind of hang them around and they're just like right there. This is amazing. ByAnnie, thank you so much for letting me film this tutorial today. I am so excited to be able to work with your pattern. If there are more ByAnnie patterns you'd like to see tutorials for, let me know down in the comment section. I will ask them and see if we can do a few more because they are so much fun. Also, make sure to check all of the links in the description. I've got links for the blog posts from all the other creators. We've got some amazing creators, guys. You're gonna have so much fun. No matter what you're looking to make, there is somebody making something you're gonna love this month. Also, make sure to check for my blog post down in the description for a little giveaway we're doing over on my website. If you see something in the video that you don't find a link for in the description, make sure to send me an email or go ahead and put a comment down there and I'll help you find it. I know I use a lot of different materials in all my bags, so sometimes I don't list everything, but if there's something specific, I will do my very best to help you find it. I hope you're having a great day. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your week. If you need a mammogram, please make sure you go and get one. You gotta take care of the girls. Have a fantastic October. So pink. See you later.